Hi, everybody. So we're just waiting for people to trickle in. All right, yeah, I see all the people joining in right now. The list of participants is ticking up, so that's awesome to see everybody here. We're just gonna wait a minute or so just to let everybody get settled in, make sure they can hear everything, see everything properly, and we'll get started really soon. All right, awesome. 6:01, so I guess we'll get started now. All right, so hi, good evening, everybody. So my name's Alvis. I'm a second year interactive multimedia and design student who loves all things graphic design, user interface, and animation related. And today I have the pleasure of moderating today's Empower Voices panel on how to make engineering and information technology a more inclusive space for everybody. Carleton University's Faculty of Engineering and Design takes great pride in hosting and participating in conversations like this one today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, we would like to acknowledge the Algonquin Nation, whose traditional and unceded territory we are gathered upon. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improve our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. Together, please consider how we are and can each in our own way try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Carleton itself also has a Center for Indigenous Initiatives, which is a support space for the community to have safe dialogue and learn about the Indigenous culture. If you're interested in learning more, there are tons of resources available to the broader Carleton community, like their virtual Indigenous book club. All right, now I'd like to run through some rules for today's panel. So this is a Zoom webinar, and therefore all microphones and videos have automatically been turned off for you. We will also be recording this session, so if you would like to remain anonymous when typing your comments in the chat box, please consider changing your screen names to something like your initials. And at the end of the session, there will also be time for audience Q&A, and we invite you to ask your questions in the chat. And now turning things over to our panelists, I'd like to thank them for making the time to join us today, and I'll give them the opportunity to introduce themselves. So first, let's start with Christian. I'll turn it over to you, and then Aisha, and then Lindsay.
Awesome. Thank you, Alvis. There you go. Unmuted myself. So good evening, everyone. I'm Christian Viau. I'm actually an assistant professor here at Carleton in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. So I tend to do, besides teaching, of course, I tend to do some research, and I look at how to better protect our infrastructures like our building against extreme loadings like blast explosions. I'm born and raised here in Ottawa, and I've done a bit of time in the industry, but I'm specifically, I guess, new to the game of academia. But I did my PhD, my master's, and my bachelor's at the University of Ottawa. So a bit of rivalry going around between Carleton and the University of Ottawa. So I'm still in the thick of it. So welcome to everyone tonight, and I'm glad to be here.
All right, Aisha.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Aisha. I'm in my second year of aerospace engineering at Carleton University. I'm specializing in aerospace system structures and vehicle design. So at Carleton, aerospace is split into 4 different streams, and I'm just kind of focusing more on the materials of the aircraft because that's something that I'm most interested in. I'm super involved within the engineering community, and I can't wait to share all my experiences with all of you.
Awesome. And last but not least, Lindsay.
Hi. I'd like to thank you all for having me here as well. I'm from Ottawa and did my engineering degree at Carleton, and then my graduate work at Carleton as well in the medical physics program. And now I'm a research scientist at Health Canada in the Consumer and Clinical Radiation Protection Bureau. So I spend a lot of my time doing research on the health effects of radiation exposure, and I do a lot of risk assessment activity in that field as well. And on a personal note, I'm very family oriented, and so I'm lucky enough to spend quite a bit of time at my family's farm just outside of Ottawa. So thanks again for having me here.
All right, awesome. Thanks for being here. Nice to meet everybody. All right, so today our panel will be divided into 3 themes. So first we'll talk about support inside the classroom, then we'll move on to talking about support outside the classroom, and then lastly, we'll transition into talking about school into the workforce. So starting with our first theme of the night, inside the classroom. Everyone's university experience is different, and our diversity of experiences, backgrounds, and identities at Carleton are really what shape the unique community that we have. So I'd like to take the time to discuss the value of equity, diversity, and inclusion on campus, particularly in engineering and design, and what it means to you. So Aisha, how has your identity shaped your experience in STEM inside the classroom?
Yeah, for sure. So I remember back when I was in high school that part of me wasn't exactly sure if I wanted to pursue engineering due to the lack of representation. Engineering was always kind of seen as a male-dominated profession, and I wasn't sure if I could feel included in that. I always really enjoyed STEM subjects in high school, but that kind of was the limiting thought that I had in my head. After attending panels kind of like this one, I got to see a lot more representation with women in STEM and visible minorities. And after kind of seeing the Carleton community, I saw that there was definitely a lot more representation than there was before, and I felt more comfortable. In the classroom, kind of working with people from a bunch of different backgrounds made me realize that each person had their own diverse perspective on solving problems. So whether that be kind of breaking down the problem or just looking at it from a different angle, it was both beneficial for me and for them. I would be able to learn something from them, and they would also be able to learn something from me.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Like diversity is super important for like the reasons you said, and also just seeing yourself being represented in, like a program like engineering is also super important because it encourages more people to join. And Christian, what is your experience as a professor within the STEM field as it relates inside the classroom?
Well, that's a very good question, and I will say that I've only been professionally a professor for about 2 years now, so I'll try to comment on that, but I will also reflect on my experience as a student, and it's not been that far off. It's only been 11 years since I started my bachelor's. But anyway, so the concept of equity, diversity, and inclusion, one, they're very important in the classroom and even in research. This concept of what we call EDI, the acronym for equity, diversity, and inclusion is very important. In terms of my experience as a grad student, as an undergraduate student, we each all have our differences. We have our different experiences. Focusing on myself, as a French Canadian, as the first person in my family to go to university and get a postgraduate degree, in itself, it was something I had to overcome. Like, hey, can I do it myself? Am I meant to do this? So there is that I guess challenge that one has to overcome, and everyone comes from a different background and different experiences, so that everyone has their own individual challenges. So, as Aisha pointed out, as a queer person, I value very much so diversity amongst my peers, my colleagues, my students, and as it has been alluded to, the more different opinions, the more different views on life and society, you enrich yourself, and you tend to make it a learning experience, not on the content itself within the classroom, but from your peers around you, and you get to learn that we're so different, but we're so similar in that sense. And before I pass it on to the next panelist, I want to kind of flip around the question and how my experience in STEM has kind of influenced my identity, whether it be my as a person and my sexual orientation, et cetera, and all of that good stuff. In terms of civil engineering, you associate that with getting dirty, working in laboratories, working with concrete, getting your hands dirty, and working with math, and you applying all that math. As a queer person, it kind of helps. It helped me come out and say, I can also do this. And in essence, what it comes down to is anyone can really do it. So it's breaking down those barriers and these preconceived notions that engineering is for straight men in this field. No, it can be for everyone. You just have to believe in yourself, and you need to have a supportive environment. And I know that Carleton is one of those institutions.
Yeah, thank you for those insights. So Aisha, I know you're in some leadership roles on campus, so hearing your perspective on things is super interesting. And Christian, hearing your perspective is also super interesting as you're an educator, but also like a role model to your students and other queer people, and really set the tone and course for them to follow. So this kind of brings me to my next question for you too. So what resources have you found helpful to creating a more inclusive space inside the classroom? So let's start with Aisha first.
Yeah, for sure. So one important thing that I found really helpful was forming connections and friendships outside of the classroom, so that those connections would help me within the classroom. It kind of helped me understand the differences between others and the similarities that we share together. So kind of bringing back that concept back into the classroom helped me feel a lot more comfortable and included within the classroom space. I've also found that my professors really promote inclusion within the workspace by encouraging a lot of participants from everyone and promoting kind of like group discussions. And they also have office hours, which help for extra student support. So that was really inviting and inclusive to the workplace. I also found the importance of being more open-minded and hearing about new different changes within EDI. So example, pronouns have become more important of identifying someone at this point in time. So it's really important to be more open about that and not assume someone's pronouns. And that can kind of help create a more inclusive space.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And Christian, I'll ask you the same question. What resources have you found helpful to creating a more inclusive space inside the classroom?
So from a perspective of an educator, of a professor who's usually standing in front of the classroom, nowadays I'm talking to a screen half the time. Essentially, I would say the educators they're becoming more educated in regard to these concepts of EDI, and the administration and our federal government, I would say, has done a good job kind of promoting and kind of educating people as to why it's important to actually use and apply what they're being taught on a professional basis. In terms of a more direct action that has been implemented, in most universities, Carleton especially, is this notion of accommodation services. So a lot of students learn differently. They learn at different speeds. They have disabilities. Sometimes they just need an extra hand to maximize their education and their classroom experience. So accommodation services really helps those that ask for it, essentially. So that would take things into account, like people who have difficulty, who have learning disabilities, who have difficulty with their eyesight, or anything that can hinder their experience and their learning experience. And that, of course, is free of charge. It's a service provided by the university. And it kind of breaks down some of those barriers and promotes, I would say, equity and inclusion and diversity. That being said, and I don't want to get political, and I won't get political here, this is not the time for that, I would say the next step forward, in terms of further improving EDI, would be in terms of the cost of education. In a first world country, the fact that university can be expensive at some points, that's another challenge we have today. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. It is, I guess, to conclude, we're making great strides, and we do have services and places here at Carleton to promote this inside the classroom.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like having as little barriers of entry as possible really makes university and education more accessible for all and makes people feel more included. All right, awesome. So now that we heard about inside the classroom experiences, let's move to talking about our second theme of the evening, outside the classroom. So Carleton University offers many different ways for students to get involved, ranging from clubs, teams, societies, to even co-op. And whether or not you choose to participate in those are totally up to you. So I'd like to hear from our panelists tonight about outside of the classroom experiences at Carleton University as it relates to advancing the conversation around equity, diversity, and inclusion commitments. So what have you taken a part in? What did you learn? And where has it led you? I'll start with Lindsay first to answer this question.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, so I was at Carleton in the early to mid 2000s. And I would say like I was quite shy, but even at that point, I started participating in volunteer opportunities. So leadership roles in the engineering society, and just exploring what the different options were. So in the leadership role for the graduate students in physics, and I found that that was really helpful. And so trying to find your community and people that you can connect with. And I found that that was a really good learning opportunity for how things worked and what resources were available. And I was able to use that to my advantage when I left school, and now I'm the government. And so then I'm quite active in a number of initiatives in the government. So EDI programs at Health Canada, but also I maintain connections with the engineering and the physics communities as well. And I'm also an active mentor in the Carleton Alumni Mentoring Program. And so there's a lot of good resources. And so as you're going through your program, if something doesn't work for you, like as Alvis mentioned, explore your options. And I found that just led to really interesting connections. You can meet a lot of interesting people. And I find that the people that are out there and getting involved often have really great stories and experiences that you can learn from. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like volunteering is a really great way to branch off and meet new people, especially if you're on more of like a shyer person, and you can really build a great community and network, and who knows, it might help you in the future as well. Aisha, I'll ask you the same question. What have you taken part in? What did you learn? And where has it led you?
Yeah, so even in high school, I was kind of a shy person. And I remember that the way that I could counteract that was to getting involved in stuff and meeting new people. So that made me a lot less shy as a person. Currently, right now, I'm the Vice President Internal of the Carleton University Engiqueers. So it's also known as Q. And that's pretty much a student society that is targeted towards engineering students that are within the LGBTQ plus community. But everyone is welcome. And as someone who is part of that community, it was a place where I could be myself and feel included. I got to learn a lot more about EDI that I didn't even know about through that society. And I learned how to be a lot more open-minded. And kind of the experience that I've got from being in Q has allowed me to educate others on like all stuff EDI, so that they can stay up to date about EDI as well. And then also last summer, I had the pleasure of being a summer camp instructor with Virtual Ventures. And Virtual Ventures offers workshops and summer camps to students from kindergarten to grade 12 to help them gain more interest in STEM. And I found it to be a super valuable experience. I've noticed how the education system has changed a lot since I've been in elementary school. I know I'm only second year university student. I'm still pretty young, but it has changed quite a bit. I remember that I only learned to code when I was in grade 11. And at that age, elementary students are already learning how to code. And it was incredible to see how young students could know how to code at that age. I noticed also a lot of diversity with the students that were attending the workshops. And it kind of showed me how engineering is getting more and more diversity from introducing STEM to kids at a young age. And this experience has helped me to become more of a role model to others. And at least in this experience, they could know that they could get to the point where I am today.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you mentioned. I remember when I was like, in elementary school, the most techie thing that I've done was probably like typing classes and learning how to type as quick as possible. But it's really cool seeing that now like kids have access to learning how to code and learning such valuable skills at such a young age. All right, and Christian, I didn't forget about you. I'll ask you the same question as well. What have you taken a part in? What did you learn? And where has it led you?
So full disclosure, I was one of those introverted university people who just focused on their coursework, barely attended any student groups. I mean, it kind of led me to, excel academically in that sense. But what I did lack was, student experience, different people, and I'll blame it on me being shy and not out of my shell. But these days, a bit more about that. But I would say here I've only been at Carleton for 9 months. So in terms of outside the classroom experience, I haven't had much experience, but I will say that I actually participated in the Pride Parade. I think it was about in 2019, right before the pandemic. I was part of the Queer float between the University of Ottawa and the Carleton University chapter, and it was a great experience. And the type of people I got to meet that day, even if it was for a couple of hours, you could tell that people, you felt a sense of community within the group, and support. And I think you come to university, you do you. If you're introverted and you need time to come out of your shell, no worries. If you're extroverted and you want to meet people, there's plenty of groups, plenty of different types of people to meet. And there's groups, there's clubs, activity groups for all walks of life and all different types of people. So I would say you have a good support system that fall outside of academics. So you get a good balance here of support.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think a common theme tonight, as we're talking about this theme of outside the classroom experiences, is that, really branching off and joining clubs. You never know, you might meet some new people, get some new opinions, learn more about the world around you. So yeah, those are really great points by everybody. Thank you. And lastly, moving to our last theme of the night, to wrap this panel segment of this event, I'd like to talk a little bit about making the transition from school into the industry. So it can be a mixture of excitement and nerves to go from essentially being a student your entire life to landing your first industry job and starting your professional career. Lindsay, would you like to share your advice to students who are transitioning into the workforce and are worried about entering a brand new environment where they feel welcome and supported?
For sure, yeah, and I understand that can be really daunting as you graduate and you think, okay, I'm really comfortable being a student, but now what? So I entered the government, and I come from a family of farmers, and so no experience in my family with the government system. And something that's taken me a little bit of time, but I would highly encourage people, is to look for the resources that are available to you. We've talked a lot about the resources at Carleton, but the federal government is an example where there's just so many resources and teams and learning opportunities, and sometimes it's buried pretty deep in the bureaucracy, but it's there. And so learning to explore what resources and what tools are out there is invaluable. And then again, just building those communities and like finding some peers to communicate with, to support you, I think is really important. So I would strongly suggest seeking out mentors. So people in your team, maybe adjacent to your team, and you can have more than one. It can be a one-off conversation or it can be bigger, but don't be afraid to look for those mentors, because that can be really helpful and encouraging. And if you're nervous about something in particular, it can really help, give you confidence or help guide you. Sorry. So yeah, that would be my best suggestion, is to find those resources. There's a lot of, I think you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of progress in terms of what's out there. And I see a lot of changes happening. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Finding like a good mentor is really great, because there's someone who's experienced in that field. Maybe they've experienced the same thing you're going through. So really having that person to talk to is really important and can be really beneficial. And Christian, since you're a professor, I'm assuming you've experienced both sides of the spectrum, from you applying to your own jobs to maybe seeing some of your students starting to apply to some jobs. What are your advices on students who are transitioning into the workforce?
Well, first advice I'll say is don't become a professor, because you're going to be stuck in academia for the rest of your life. No, in all seriousness, I would say the key thing is to network. And sometimes networking doesn't have to be like you would imagine, walking up to random people at a career fair and, trying to strike up small talk to hopefully get an invitation to an interview. Networking means, befriend people with whom you share, say similar ways of thinking, that you trust, that you've known from other courses, from other clubs. And that is effectively networking, and you never know what might come your way. And to also look at other, and I think Lindsay really touched upon that, are the services that are offered here at Carleton, and provincial and federal governments. They have a lot of programs. Specifically here at Carleton, thinking of joining the co-op program is an easy way to get your feet wet and to get that starting point, and to ultimately finish your bachelor's with a job lined up. And I would say, and I think the question was entering a new space, you're going from academia, which is very, people are friendly. There's a lot of it's a very controlled environment, and it's made to be that way, to be very inclusive, and to jump into an industry that might not be as controlled. I perfectly understand. And I worked for a couple of months at a design firm, and the office culture and all of that was very different. And I would say, try as much to do your research, first of all, into the companies you're thinking of applying with. A lot of them are going to have some show of how they value their employees, how they value people from underrepresented group and diversity and all of that stuff. And there's a lot of resources on the internet, for example, Glassdoor, that can help you to make those judgments. But definitely do not consider becoming a professor. I'm joking.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like how a company values their employer is really getting more transparent these days, from people like having conversations like the one we're having tonight. And yeah, just like figuring out how these things work. Awesome. So as a current student, though, there are also many resources available to you at Carleton to help support your transition. So Aisha, did you want to share what the student societies and groups in engineering and IT are doing in order to help empower marginalized students to feel supported and welcome as they break into their profession?
Yeah, so when I was in first year, I was very nervous, and I wasn't sure what to expect, because university is apparently a very big jump from high school. One resource that I found super valuable was the first year connections program. So pretty much in that program, you're paired with a mentor that's an upper year student that's usually in the same program as you. And you meet with them once a week just to check in, ask questions, and kind of have that smooth transition from high school into university. That definitely helped me a lot more to become prepared and kind of know what to expect. This year, I actually got to work as a first year connections mentor, and I got to meet a lot of international students, some that were still back home because of COVID, but some of them also just moved to Ottawa, so they were very new with the whole new experience and culture. So I got to help them transition and also introduce them to a bunch of different resources that could help them feel included within the community, and also meet people that were in similar situations that they were. I also found that first year representatives were super important as well. I'm not sure about other student societies, but I know for sure CSCS, which is the Carleton Student Engineering Society, and the Carleton University Engineers, their first year representatives hold events, first year events for first year students. So that's definitely a great opportunity to meet other first year students and form connections. And I also found some student societies had inclusivity events, and that definitely helped educate us more about EDI and all that sort of fun stuff. So that was great as well. And finally, also Entourage is also another event that is held at the beginning of the year. And that was also a great transition for me, since I didn't know anyone at the beginning of the year. And my first year was entirely online. So I didn't know how to approach that at all and how to meet people. But through Entourage, I got to meet a lot of upper year students as well as students in my year and got to form some really strong connections with them.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And as you mentioned before, Carleton has tons and tons of great resources that are available to students. You know, me personally speaking, I'm in second year, so I'm currently doing co-op and finding a co-op job. And I remember being super, super stressed out about that, trying to like write a resume, write a good cover letter to speak to prospective employers, worrying about interviewing and that whole process. And I really found that Carleton's co-op program had many, many great resources. They've actually hosted like webinars like the one we're having today, where upper year students who have done co-op were really able to talk about their own experiences, share their wisdoms and insights as to finding a job. And those kind of resources really helped, you know, lessen the stress that I was feeling, because I knew so many other students that were facing the similar, you know, experiences that I'm facing right now. And just knowing that Carleton has the resources that are available to students is really great. All right, and that kind of wraps up the theme portion of tonight's panel. I'd now like to invite members of the audience to consider any questions they might have for our panelists today. You are welcome to type them into the Q&A box. Again, we are recording this session, so if you do want to remain anonymous, consider changing your screen name to something like your initials. All right, so we'll wait for some of the Q&A that's gonna pop in the chat box. And you know, while we wait, I know networking was something that we also talked about during this webinar. Does anybody have any more insights into that? Maybe Lindsay, you'd like to share a little bit more about how networking has helped you?
Yeah, I am happy to share. All of my exciting opportunities have come from networking, and it's in ways that might surprise you. So a lot of it comes from just talking to people where you might be uncomfortable. Like a professor, I remember talking to a very senior professor about, you know, I'm graduating soon and not really sure. And he said, oh, come to a seminar. And I know just the person I want to introduce you to. And that person became my graduate supervisor, who became my boss, you know, and it was just from that hallway conversation of, you know, putting it out there that I was looking and uncertain. And that happens a lot. And so even if you're slightly uncomfortable having those conversations, I would challenge you to practice. Because those informal conversations and putting it out, hey, I'm looking for this opportunity, or I'm looking for, you know, someone who might be interested in this, and putting out what your interests are can just lead to some great conversations. And then people keep that in mind later, and they'll say like, oh, I know someone who's looking for this type of opportunity. So that can really pay off.
Yeah, definitely. You never know who you can meet and how they might help you in the future. All right, so I have a question from Tamika. So what is the most important skill to retain in engineering and security for life after studies? So Christian, maybe you'd want to answer that question?
Well, that's a good question. Skill?
Yeah.
I would say to be successful, from my own experience, to be successful in engineering, you need to always remain curious and always want to seek a solution and the whys. I guess that is kind of a driver from everyone that I've met in engineering. You know, they're always curious, and that kind of motivates them to pursue whatever it is, whether it be their studies or, you know, like a career in a design office. Now, in regard to security, and I don't know if that's like job security. I'm not too sure, but I'll take it as that. I would say after your and one thing you have to realize for those of you who are high school students or potentially becoming Carleton students is that after your 4-year degree, you're not done learning. You're going to be learning till the day you die. And that includes during your career. So as you eventually progress through your professional careers, you're going to see new technology, new ways of thinking, new ways of doing stuff. And if you want to maintain, I guess, your worth and to increase your worth as a then professional, you always have to be learning. Always want to be sharpening your skills and learning what is the next, you know, finite element software being used to model structures in 2030, for example. It won't be the ones we're using today. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
All right, awesome, thank you. And the next question that we have is actually open for everyone on the panel. What advice would you give a first-year student starting in the fall? So Aisha, did you want to go first?
Yeah, for sure. So my biggest advice, as I kind of mentioned before, I think the first year connections program was definitely the most helpful resource that I've had. I remember I was being so scared about falling behind on assignments and just staying organized. I think that was the biggest thing for me that was a lot different from high school to university. There are a lot of assignments and deadlines to keep track of. So it's really important that you have a good organization system. And I feel like through the first year connections program, you can learn all those skills from an upper year student who has been in the same position as you before.
And Lindsay, what about you?
Yeah, I would say try to connect with your TAs, especially in first year. So it took me too long to figure that out. The TAs are there, they have office hours, they're more senior students, they have a lot of experience. The professors too, every professor and TA that I've worked with has really been keen to help the students. And I remember sitting through office hours where no one showed up. And then when people would show up, you know, we'd be more than happy to help them. And so, yeah, take advantage of that. And don't be too scared to just show up and say like, I don't know the answer. And I often thought, oh, I have to solve this before I can go ask the question. And most people are happy to help if you just show up and ask. So I would say take advantage of the TAs and the office hours available to you.
Yeah, and I also feel like office hours are a really great opportunity to get to know your professor, because usually if you're in a classroom with like 300 other people, you're not going to have that one-on-one time with the professor. Whereas in office hours, there usually is not that many people. So that's really a great opportunity to also get to know your professor as well. And Christian, how about you? What advice would you give a first-year student starting in the fall?
So I first of all, just to continue on what Lindsay was saying, yeah, professors, we don't bite. If we have office hours, they're meant to be used by students to come and ask their questions and to talk. So really take advantage of those. They will save you a lot of headaches in the long run. Same goes for TAs. And I'll just make it a little, I guess, a little story. Back in 2009, I was writing my first ever midterm in the fall of 2009. And I learned the hard way that university is not the same as high school. You need to schedule your assignments, your readings, etc. And I think I ended up with my first midterm landing with a 50% in physics. So that was my rude awakening. And unfortunately, a lot of students learned the hard way how to do university properly. So really take these advices that you're being handed out tonight, and those first year connection programs. They'll kind of help you skip those heartaches and jump right into having a good, successful academic career as a student.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so our next question is from Tamika. What is the most important skill to retain in, oh, sorry, this question's already been answered, my bad. All right, so our next question is actually for Aisha. So what is the best way to build your network if you're an introverted person?
Yeah, so I'd say probably Entourage is definitely the best way to transition and to start meeting people. I remember in Entourage, there were a lot of super introverted people that didn't really want to talk. But when you have that small group of people, so in Entourage, you're split into different teams. So you're kind of stuck with that small group of people for the week. And being like part of those people, you're able to network with them and connect with them, share your interests, and you get to kind of learn more about each other and make a strong friendship. So I believe that's super important. It kind of helps you to start your way in getting involved in the engineering community without actually starting to join any clubs or societies if you're not interested in that in the beginning. So I definitely think that's a good transition, but there are a lot of different clubs and societies out there for every type of person. So it's definitely something to look into. It was super valuable experience for me, and I believe everyone else could probably say the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. And for me personally speaking, since I'm on residence right now, residence is also an option available for all first-year students that's guaranteed. Basically on residence, they have a bunch of events that's either hosted by your residence fellow or maybe just by the residence community in general. I know sometime in the fall, we had like a Squid Games kind of showdown games show kind of thing that was going on for students. And that can also be a great way to meet new people and just really get out there. And yeah. All right, so this next question is for Christian and Lindsay. So what resources do you think students should be aware of when entering first year? Lindsay, did you want to go first?
Sure. I think we've touched on some of them, like the TAing and joining some of the clubs and societies. I would say if you're thinking, I've seen some of the other questions too, but co-ops. We've talked about co-ops in the engineering department. I would also mention that there's the Federal Student Work Exchange Program, and I can drop a link in the chat, but that's an option too for students. And I know that the government hires from that program, and it's a great way to get federal government experience. And I am not familiar with it, but I think there are probably similar programs maybe at the provincial level. So I would say career services is also, I think, in my impression, maybe an underutilized service. And they can help you with resumes and they can help you with guidance. And maybe you don't need it till your fourth year, but if you start exploring your options in first year, I think you'll find opportunities. And the other thing I would mention is I didn't find out until fourth year, but there's often support to going to conferences, and there's undergrad student conferences if you're interested in particular subjects or your specialties. I suggest to my mentees that you look for those conferences often in Ottawa or seminars that you can attend. It's another great way to network.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also important to mention that, you know, just because you're in fourth year and you're in your final year of university, it's never too late to discover new resources or whatever. You know, if you're in first year and discovering these resources, that's great. You might get a head start, but it's also never too late to start a little bit later. And Christian, I'll ask you the same question.
So I would say and I know there's a couple of those out there. If you are planning, if your career entails research, even if you're a first year, second year, you know, undergrad in general, there are some undergraduate research assistantship programs where professors like me will actually hire you to work with us in terms of research at Carleton. So that's all that is a potential resource. On obviously not everyone here, or so I would say not every undergrad wants to do research, but for those of you that have that interest in mind, it's available. And I would say another key resource to be aware of are all the services that are kind of included with the tuition and the service fees that you pay when you attend Carleton. For example, you know, access to the pool, access to the gym, access to intramurals, all of these things that are you know, outside of, you know, just studying and learning. They will make your experience better, and they'll also contribute to a healthier lifestyle and a healthier you know, mental health, and that is a big thing that you need to keep in mind when you're attending university, that it's fine to want to study and perform and get good grades, but you also have to maintain not only your body but also your mental health, and there has been a lot of progress in terms of getting that message out there, and the resources are here for you.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like finding that, you know, balance between work, school, and your own mental health and social aspects, stuff like that is really important to get down as a student. And this next question is from Teshi, and this is actually for Christian again. So what has been your favorite part about being a professor at Carleton?
So I've only been here since July and middle of pandemic, which sucked. But I have had the chance to, you know, walk around the campus, go to my office, go to my labs, and I would say, you know, it's a nice campus. You know, we're getting plenty of nice buildings being built, which is you know, which is a nice site. It's close to Bank Street, or yeah, Bank Street, Bronson, all of that, those main arterial roads, and you can get access to a lot of, you know, nearby communities to go do stuff that isn't related to Carleton if ever you're sick of the campus. I guess to touch upon, I guess my position as a professor, I've only taught one course so far. It's been a graduate course, but I would say, you know, the student body here at Carleton is quite diverse, which is interesting because it brings a lot of, you know, different opinions and ways to look at and solve problems. So I'm teaching right now a graduate course on the blast effects on structures. So, you know, you're getting people from across Canada, international students, and I would say that that's a good way to look at Carleton. It's a very diverse and inclusive community.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the reasons why I chose Carleton as well, because of the extremely diverse student body that we have. All right, and this next question is from Sebastian. So what kind of clubs and groups are there to join? So I guess this has been alluded to a little bit before, but Aisha, why don't you talk about the kind of clubs and groups there are at Carleton?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of them, and I can't say every single one because there are a lot, but you do have different kinds of teams that you can be part of. So you have student societies, and that's kind of more people who are interested in like student government. So like if you are really involved in student council or something in high school, that could be a good option for you. They have student societies for each of the different streams in engineering. And then they have CSCS, which is kind of the main general one. And then Carleton University Engineers, which is another kind of general one. So that is definitely an option. The other side of it is design teams. So you could have, there's Ravens Racings that builds a race car that they go to competition and race at. There's the Trotsky Bridge team where they build a bridge. I think it's hosted in Concordia, and it's like a competition to build a bridge. I actually took part in that one. It was a lot of fun. It was online, unfortunately, but it would definitely be a lot of fun to do in person. There's a space team, See You in Space. There's a lot of different design teams, so it's definitely worth taking a look at. And then there's other kind of separate clubs and like that are aside from that. So there's like the engineering musical. That's definitely a fun one to be part of. I haven't gotten a chance to be part of it yet, but I might in the future possibly. They pretty much take a musical and parody it. So it's kind of engineering themed, which is pretty cool. But yeah, there's definitely lots of different clubs and societies out there. So it's worth taking a look into. And it's definitely, there will definitely be a spot for you somewhere in one of those societies.
Yeah, definitely. And if sports are your thing, Carleton also has many teams and intramurals. So there's like dodgeball intramurals, frisbee, basketball, volleyball. If you want to like gather a group of friends and like play, or you can just join yourself and you'll be placed onto a team that's also available for you to join and have fun. All right, this next question. Are there many people with disabilities or disorders that succeed in engineering and design programs? So Christian, did you want to talk a little bit about that?
I mean, many. I mean, I don't know. I can't really quantify it, but I will say, so I've been teaching, you know, as a part-time prof at U Ottawa, and now as a full-time prof at Carleton. I've been teaching for well over 5 years. And in all my classes, I've dealt and I've met various students with, you know, various self-declared disabilities and, you know, differences. I would say that would, you know, so in some cases they would make their learning experience a bit more difficult. So they would require help from, you know, accommodation services and getting to know me better so I could further understand where they were coming from. What are some things that I could do to facilitate their learning? And I would say about, you know, 95%, 99% of professors at Carleton have the same mentality as me. Honestly, any professor is going to approach students with particular challenges and you know, and try to make their learning experience better. But yeah, no, they definitely exist. Obviously, they're out there. They're part of the general population. So of course there will be some, and they have just as much chance to succeed as any other person.
Yeah, and one thing to mention is that Carleton also has the Paul Menton Center, which is a really great resource for students. If you need any type of accommodations in your education, that's a great place to go and talk to anybody about. So the next question that we have is, what are the biggest challenges in engineering, not just at Carleton, but I guess in general? So Lindsay, did you want to talk a little bit about that?
That's a tough one. I think for me, and I touched on it a little bit, is I find a lot of, like, myself and my colleagues, and I think a number of us on the panel have touched on it too, that we tend to be introverted. And so it can be sometimes a little bit uncomfortable to put yourself out there, to join the clubs, or to take on some of those leadership roles. And you think, especially I see it in science, I forget what you call them now, but that false sense of like, am I really supposed to be here? Am I really, you know, an expert in this? And so, but I think that that's a fairly common feeling. And so something that I've practiced is in those, like at a conference, and I'll say, okay, I'm not leaving this social, you know, icebreaker until I've talked to 3 new people. You know, I'll set myself these little challenges. And so I find like trying to overcome that discomfort in those new situations is a big challenge. And we've touched on, you know, learning opportunities and networking and stuff, but showing up to those events and putting yourself out there, to me, is one of the biggest challenges, but it's worth the effort.
Yeah, and putting yourself out there and just attending events like that is a great first step. You know, you might not have, you know, the courage that night specifically to talk to as many people as you would like, but, you know, just making that step and actively going towards that goal is a great mentality to have as well. And Aisha, I know you're a student in engineering right now. What are some of the biggest challenges that you're facing in engineering?
Yeah, so for me personally, during my first year, I found a lot of trouble with balancing schoolwork. It was definitely a lot more than high school, and there were a lot of courses to balance, especially since in first year, everything's general. So you have a lot more courses that you're dealing with. So it was a little bit of a challenge to balance it all. But I kind of overcame that by meeting with people and studying together in groups. I feel like it's super important in engineering that you're kind of working together as a team. Because if you're doing engineering all by yourself, you're going to be struggling a lot, and it's just going to be a lot for you. So you need to make sure that you're also taking care of yourself. I found that a very important thing, to kind of schedule in breaks into your schedule to make sure you're not just overworking yourself. And yeah, just the studying in groups really helped me get through the first year and eventually the rest of the years as well.
Yeah, definitely. And this next question, I guess, is aimed towards me. How is the interactive multimedia and design program at both Carleton and Algonquin? Is it hard transitioning from one another? So I guess a little bit more of a context before I start. Basically, the IMD program is a collaboration between Carleton University and Algonquin. And kind of, it's like a really great mix between the 2 educational institutions. I'd say Carleton teaches definitely the more theoretical side of things. So stuff like computer programming, learning about circuits, maybe physics, math, business, all these foundational stuff. Whereas the courses that are offered at Algonquin are more creative based. So that's stuff like animation, web design, graphic design, stuff like that. And it's really a great mix between the both. And one thing about the IMD program is that they actually, you know, split it up so that one day specifically you're at Algonquin and another day specifically you're at Carleton. So the courses will never like overlap with each other, and you're not commuting between 2 schools within one day. All right, and the next question is open to everybody. What are your favorite Carleton traditions, and what are your favorite things to do on campus? Lindsay, I know you're a graduate of Carleton. What are some of your favorite, you know, things to do or traditions?
I just found that Carleton was a beautiful campus. So, and I think Aisha mentioned it too, like to schedule your breaks. There's a lot of great facilities, but a nice highlight is that there's a lot of green space on campus, despite all the new buildings. Right across the the canal's right there. So in the winter you can go skating. There's easy access. There's the locks right across the canal, like steps away from the dorms is the arboretum. So like a beautiful green space to go for walks. And there's the experimental farm, which is right there. So if you can spend some time, get some fresh air, get outside, that's really enjoyable, I would say.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the Rideau Canal. So it's like right beside Carleton. And like I'm a runner, so what I really enjoy is like in the fall time, whether it's like nice and crisp, I can actually go running around the canal and it's super nice. The views are super beautiful, and you just get that like really nice fresh air at Carleton. All right, and this next question is from Sebastian. So Aisha, can you tell us a little bit more about Entourage?
Yeah, so Entourage is pretty much orientation at the beginning. So it happens right before, or it might be during when classes are just kind of starting. But it's an opportunity to meet a lot of people, and they host activities throughout the week. So it's a bunch of different activities that you work with your team. And it's just kind of a huge opportunity to like really meet people and kind of learn more about the engineering community. I remember I learned a lot from the upper year students that were there, especially about aerospace engineering, because I knew that there were different streams and I wasn't sure which one to pick. So they really helped me out a lot there. And they're also in all different streams of engineering. So you get to learn a lot of different perspectives from different people about what they like to enjoy and what you like to enjoy, and kind of share similarities and interests with each other. Yeah, it's definitely a fun time. And yeah, that's pretty much what Entourage is.
Yeah, it's a really great opportunity during your first week because you're like, for me, for example, I'm from Toronto, so I actually moved all the way to Ottawa for this year. And, Entourage was a great way for me to get to meet new people in Ottawa and get some new friends. All right, so this next question is from Roma. So did you do any other extracurricular activities in high school that helped you with being successful in your specific program? So Christian, I know it's been a while since you've been in high school, but maybe do you have any advice on taking
Not that
any
long.
extracurricular? Oh, no, not that long, obviously not.
So I actually went to a high school in Ottawa called Collège Catholique Samuel Genet, and they have a program for sciences. It's called like scientific concentration. So that kind of exposed me to lab work, a bit more advanced math than you would see, and a lot of tech work. So that kind of helped me start gaining those like course content before actually jumping into university. Extracurricular, I mean, I played music a lot, and apparently playing music, actually doing any type of art is associated with just higher grades. So I guess I could associate that with me being successful in my program. But honestly, I was just always interested in sciences and math, and I guess that kind of helped me jumpstart my education eventually when I started my bachelor's back in 2009. That's all I can think of right now.
Yeah, and me personally speaking, because I'm in a design program in high school, I've actually been part of like the yearbook committee and working on graphic design and things like that. So I feel like just joining clubs in high school that are aligned with your own interests shows you, and like I guess Carleton University also, that you're interested in these kind of things. And also taking extracurriculars is really good if you do plan on applying for some of our scholarships that we have. Some of them, which are prestige based, are based on like the extracurriculars that you do, the leadership roles that you have. And those are joining extracurriculars in high school is a really good opportunity in order to highlight yourself and maybe receive some of those prestige entrance scholarships that Carleton offers. All right, so that looks like about all the questions that we have. I'd like to thank our audience for some great questions, and to our panelists, Aisha, Christian, and Lindsay, for their inspiring words and insights. If you are interested in learning more about the programs and resources available here at Carleton, we invite you to connect virtually with the Carleton ambassadors. Their team runs almost daily sessions to be able to answer your questions, and more information is available on this slide, and the link has actually been shared in the chat below.